Initially, this title was derived from a novella by Philip K. Dick called What the Dead Men Say. Paulo had read that novella and decided to use that title as inspiration. The song is not a retelling of the events of the book, and with the lyrics of this record, a big thing that we want to push, once again, as we do within Waves, is to really want the listener to come up with their own interpretation of what the song is. I want to inspire that will to be creative and that will to be inspired and that will to have imagination when listening to this record. We've already seen countless amazing interpretations of even just Catastrophist, so I look forward to seeing what comes from there. Well, the song Catastrophist, we likely started writing it shortly after Sin in the Sentence. We don't really have writing time, and I've found that having writing time is one of the few places and times when writing is contrived. So we do not benefit from writing time. We typically, when something is feeling inspiring or when we feel inspired, that's when we create and that's when we allow things to happen. So Catastrophist is generally one. It's one that we've had, I feel like, slightly longer than others. It's one that we were able to rehearse for 6 to 9 to 12 months before ever even setting foot in the studio, and that's why our studio process took so little time. It took us 16 days to record the entire record. That's it. But we came in basically at muscle memory capacity for knowing the songs. What was the concept behind the music video? The concept behind the music video, just like the earlier question where I mentioned about we want people to take these things into their own imagination, I want people to feel inspired to come up with their own depiction of what everything means on this record. I feel like too much people are given the answers of why and what and how, but I would rather people come up with their own descriptions. That being said, our director, Ryan McFall, is an absolutely incredible filmographer, and he had his own interpretation, his own meanings, and he has posted about those a little bit, but I encourage people to come up with their own depiction first and then go from there, because even we had our own internalizations of what we felt the song and the video meant. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't a matter of saying we need this, this, and that from this record or this from that record or these elements that people are used to hearing or seeing. But it really was the last record, Sin in the Sentence, and this current record, What the Dead Men Say. We just made the kind of music that came out naturally. We didn't question. We didn't set boundaries. You know, we've done a couple of records. I feel like we decided to stay in one lane and one path and stay away from other things. And that's not what wholly Trivium is. Trivium is all about allowing everything to be there when it ought to be there. And we don't even have to really say this doesn't fit, that doesn't fit. We just know, and we're able to speak to each other from guitar riffs and from the way we piece songs together. And that album's incredible. It's one of my favorite Trivium records we've ever done. It was the only time and place in the history and the career of Trivium that we were a press band. It was the only time that we had all the magazine covers, all the awards. We were at all the award shows, and all those magazines said we were the best band in the world. Speaking of this for a UK publication, you probably remember that as well. Ironically, the next record, it went from Trivium is the best band in the world to Trivium is the worst band in the world in the next record. And the next record is one that I decided to consciously rebel against everything that was the previous. And why would someone do that? I don't know. I don't know why we would do that, but I'm glad we did that, because if we made Ascendancy Part 2, sure, it would have made everyone happy, but who knows if we'd be here right now, or who knows if we'd have the maturity to recognize all the good and all the bad and all the correct steps and all the missteps that we've made, because that's what gets you where you are today. And I think that's integral to what makes someone or what makes a band or a unit into what they are in that day. While the Crusade wasn't as adored by the UK, even though it went gold, it is where Europe started coming around for a band, and we started seeing other countries and territories start to pick us up besides the UK. So it was essentially necessary. Actually, no. And, I was just talking about Crusade versus Ascendancy. Crusade was one of the only times in our career where we were told, you have 6 weeks to make the record, then you're going on tour. And that's when things felt forced. It felt forced, and I'm not saying the record is forced. There are songs that absolutely make sense as Trivium, and there are a couple songs that don't make sense as Trivium, and it's because we decided to stay away from everything that was Ascendancy. And the reason why I decided to do that was, well, Ascendancy was popular and it was beloved, but then there were also these people that didn't like us, and I don't know why I wanted to appease that, but I said, all right, let's show them what else we can do. And I also looked at what every other band was doing. Every other band was doing the same thing we just did too. Not saying we coined the mixture, but singing, screaming, breakdowns, solos, fast double bass. So I said, we're getting rid of all of that. There's no screaming, there's no breakdowns, there's no fast double bass. Let's make an 80s influenced thrash record. When Trivium decides to stay in a path is when we aren't fully Trivium, and when we allow everything to happen like we did in Ascendancy, like we did on Ember, Ascendancy, In Waves, Shogun, Sin, and Dead Men. That's when we really are Trivium. When we allow everything to be there, everything to take place, everything to inspire us. And Ascendancy was one of those times, in addition to all those feelings, Ascendancy and all those records I just mentioned were the times that none of the songs were finished till all four of us were in the room together. All four of us were creating music together before we ever set foot in the studio, before we ever had a producer sitting with us. We were playing and singing, screaming these things in our jam room with the four of us. I don't know, time and a place. The big thing with Trivium is we are able to mix things that shouldn't go together. While there are a lot of great bands that mix metal and hardcore, and in turn making metalcore, or mix traditional metal and melodic death metal, or traditional metal and extreme metal, or extreme metal and hardcore, you never really see that. While I don't think Trivium is made up of only three ingredients, but the main three ingredients of genre, if you want to say, as metal as a whole, Metallica through Maiden, melodic death metal in flames throughout the gates, Gothenburg sound of the late 90s to early 2000s, and metalcore / hardcore. But I'd venture to say that the melodic death metal aspect would need to also include extreme metal, death metal, and black metal in a small amount, and then metal would need to include, great classic rock bands, perhaps in a small way, and metalcore, hardcore, including those two things, maybe punk as well. And it's that we're able to mix all those three things, and we can tour with pretty much any band. While we're able to tour with power metal bands, extreme metal bands, black metal bands, hardcore bands, metalcore bands, and it all makes sense somehow. And I think that's why people looked at this record and they saw it had everything in it, and it wasn't divisive, and it wasn't, I guess that's what it is. We didn't think too much about it, and that's why it came out so great, and that's why this new record came out so great. We didn't have to think too much about it. Which new artists are you currently inspired by? I mean, everyone always hears me talk about Fit for an Autopsy, one of my favorite bands in the world. We brought them on a couple tours. I hope to bring them out on more. The new Thy Art Is Murder records. The last two records were absolutely incredible. Ishan is one of my favorite artists in the world. He's not necessarily new, but I highly encourage everyone to check out Telemark, and especially Eremita, which was one of his groundbreaking solo records. The new Straight from the Path is amazing. New Stick to Your Guns is amazing. New Counterparts, new Norma Jean. There's so much good music out there right now. I always tell people, check my playlists. Kichicast reigns on Spotify. I list everything as the year goes on, as all the releases come out. As people have seen, we only tour with our favorite bands. The last UK run, Trivium, Code Orange, Power Trip, Venom Prison, we toured with our favorite bands in the world, and that's the way we want to do it. Started streaming about 3 years ago, sort of casually, just playing video games here and there. I befriended some of the high up people at Twitch who lent me a Twitch streaming backpack, said start streaming the shows. As our relationship furthered, I said I'd love to stream more, but I have to practice 1 to 3 to 6 hours a day, vocals and guitar. And my friend Brandon said, well, why don't you stream that? My kids want to hang out in here with us, by the way. That's what all this is. And they inspired me to start streaming my warm-ups and start streaming my practices, and then it snowballed into me rehearsing and showing and displaying my daily practice, because the way I treat my musicianship and I treat singing, screaming, guitar playing, solo playing, frontmanship, it's something that needs to be exercised all the time. It's not a getting in shape for tour, getting in shape for the records. I make sure that I'm always ready to make a record. I'm always ready to go on tour, and I'm always conditioned, much like an athlete would be for what they do. And I think that that's the ultimate way that a musician can stay in peak performance. So that's thanks to Twitch. That's thanks to Twitch and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teaching me how to be inspired to create a regiment and to recognize that you have to keep abilities practiced or they falter. And it's also from blowing my voice out in 2014. So Twitch, Jiu-Jitsu, and blowing my voice out are the reasons why I can sing, scream, and perform the way I do now.